the Comcast Cable Television Studio, this is Charlotte Today, an in-depth forum highlighting today's issues, current events, and people that affect our lifestyle in Charlotte County. And now, here's Charlotte Today.
Welcome to Charlotte Today. I'm Frank Cavanaugh, and thank you for looking in. In our continuing pursuit of your good health, we're going to talk about the 12-step program for recovery from addictions and dysfunctional behaviors. And while the program began with Alcoholics Anonymous way back in the 1930s, it has gone on to be a widely used and successful approach not only to dealing with the problems of alcohol and drug dependency, but also with eating disorders, gambling addiction, codependency, and a variety of compulsive behaviors. And it is said, in fact, that most people would benefit from adopting and practicing the 12 steps in their lives. And our guest for what is going to be a series of programs on this issue is James Byrom, and he is a certified addictions specialist with more than 15 years in addictions counseling. James is a former United States Marine and a former addict. And here in Charlotte County, he runs Mission Unity Recovery House, which is a program that provides a safe, stable, supportive, residential environment along with educational programs to people who have become homeless as a result of their addiction. James, nice to have you with us.
Thanks for asking me to be here, Frank.
I said the 12 steps goes back to the days of Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe tell folks a little bit of how the 12 steps came out of that.
Okay. The Alcoholics Anonymous program did start back in the 1930s, but the premises and the basis for the data, the information that the guys used, that they wrote the books up, the policies and procedures manual known as the Big Book of AA. That information came from the King James version of the Bible. It came out of Chronicles, the verses about what is love. And it also came out of, no reference to my name, but it also came out of the Book of James. That was the directions that one of the key figures in historical biblical times wrote down on proper behavior for people back in those days to try to abide by. And also there's another reference to a small piece of the Bible known as Sermon on the Mount, and that involves the Beatitudes, and there's an adjunctive part of the Lord's Prayer that the old guys that founded the program of recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous thought was vitally important back in those days. The origination of the program was a fellow by the name of Bill Wilson, was a fellow that was very afflicted with alcoholic tendencies and alcoholic behavior, and he was struggling with a way of trying to put his life back in order. Unfortunately, at that time, the processes that were available were better living through electricity, locking you up in an institution, the white suits, hospitalization in a mental institution for insanity. And some of those things just don't work for most alcoholics. It takes something else, something deeper and more involved. So Bill Wilson began to hear of another program that was around at that time. That was the Oxford group. And they had a premise of religious conversion based on some sound spiritual principles. And there was a very restrictive environment of strong religious guidance. And for, just based on personal experience, as an alcoholic or a drug addict, I really don't like anybody telling me what I have to do. Right. So if there was some way of tricking me into realizing that I had to follow a certain set of principles that were different than what I used to believe in, then maybe I might pay attention. So Bill Wilson went around for several months alone, stark raving sober. He got sober, he quit drinking, and he was suffering all of the symptoms that anybody suffers when they stop drinking. None of the problems go away. The only thing that stopped was the drinking. Right. And he was wondering what he could do to help himself, and he realized that he needed to have somebody to talk to. And that's when he went into an institution and was introduced to Dr. Bob Smith. And Dr. Bob Smith was just exactly what the general population thinks of a full-blown alcoholic. He was in the lockdowns, he was in the institutions, and nothing worked. But in the conversation that Bill and Bob had at the bedside, at the table, they were discussing these things, and they said, wow, we've been talking a long time, and we're still sober, and we haven't decided to go drink. And over a period of time, the two of them became good friends, and they decided, what can we do to help somebody else that's like us?
And out of the two of them, developed the steps.
Out of the two of those guys started the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
And Bill Wilson started in about 1934, and about 1935 he met Bob, and somewhere in that time frame they started developing ideas on how to continue to
As
help
we go
others.
through the steps, what fascinates me is what I said to the beginning, not only how this has worked so well for alcoholics, but how it has applies so effectively to so many other kind of dysfunctional things. Okay, steps, 12 steps. First one asks what of the person?
It's basically, it's a statement that the first 100 people that attempted this program of recovery who were successful, that means there were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people who tried that didn't make it. So the guys that wrote the book and the women that contributed also, they came up with a formula on what worked versus what didn't work. And the 12 steps, this is a personal opinion of mine over 15 years of working with alcoholics and drug addicts, I've come up with the idea and the belief system that Bill and Bob wrote a simple set of steps to trick a bunch of drunks into reading the Bible and other spiritual literature.
Right.
And later on we'll get down to step 11 that covers that. But right now in step 1, it's step 1 of the program of recovery has a statement which says we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. There's some key words in that statement that are glossed over and not really paid attention to. But first of all, being a Marine and being trained to adapt, improvise, and overcome, I'm not powerless over anything. So if I have to admit that I'm powerless, then I'm also admitting I'm a failure. So how do I convert admitting that I'm powerless into a positive solution? That's the key. First of all, admitting that there is something that I have no control over.
Right.
And that would be that alcohol or drugs or food or sex or gambling has achieved a level of control over my life where I can no longer make decisions unless the end result is how do I manifest further addictive behavior.
Must be that many of those people who come to that first step also come with the idea that, well, I can still manage some part of my life. I mean, to say that it's all become unmanageable is I mean, I can still get to work in the morning.
Right. It's that's the second part of the step 1. It's like almost part A and part B. Unmanageable. Excuse me, but I have a job. I'm married. I have kids. I go to work. I come home. I get drunk. I go to bed. I get up and go to work. I'm managing my life. But what I don't see is the pain and misery that goes on around me because I'm so self-absorbed in my own method of dealing with my own pain and misery. The unmanageability of life increases over time the more we go through the addictive cycle. It's a series of I'm hiding from my problems, or I've deluded myself into thinking I have no problems, and it's everybody else's problem dealing with my behavior.
Sure.
If they would just accept me for who I am, I mean, after all, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm taking care of my family. I'm taking care of my employer. I'm paying my bills. And this is called a high-functioning alcoholic.
Yeah, it seems like the first step. It really asks a lot of a person and is a tough one to get by and to get into. We're going to take a break for just a minute, and when we come back, we'll talk about what happens in the second step. Stay with us.